But first for you this hour then, as the flames of the devastating Palisades and Eaton fires continue burning for a third week, though they are now under control, another mammoth blaze is presenting new challenges for firefighters in Los Angeles. The Hughes fire broke out on Wednesday, ripping through some 41 square kilometers northwest of LA. The region's now under a red flag warning for critical fire risk, though officials rather optimistically added that the winds are not as strong as those that had fueled the Palisades and Eaton fires. Florent Marché reports.
This wildfire erupted north of Los Angeles on Tuesday. The inferno burned through more than 4,000 hectares in just a few hours, fueled by strong winds, low humidity, and dry brush. 50,000 people received evacuation orders and warnings.
We have over 4,000 firefighting personnel assigned to the incident, and we had a very robust ground and air response to the incident that you see behind me.
Fire crews are backed up by dozens of engines, and several water bombers sprayed tens of thousands of gallons of fire retardant from the air. Los Angeles County's fire department chief said morale among firefighters was excellent, and that his teams were making headway in containment efforts. A stretch of Interstate 5, a major highway linking Los Angeles to Central California, was temporarily shut down before reopening on Wednesday evening. The county's sheriff also noted that almost 500 inmates from a nearby prison had to be evacuated. Several schools in the area are closed. As of Wednesday, the Palisades and Eaton fires, already 3 weeks old, are mostly contained. More than 24 people have been killed so far, and forecaster AccuWeather projects economic losses to total more than $250 billion. Only 80 kilometers north of Los Angeles, the Hughes fire places a new burden on firefighters working around the clock to control the blazes.
Well, for some more context then behind these fires, Chloe Brimicombe joins us on the program. She is a climate scientist and extreme heat researcher with the Wegener Centre at the University of Graz in Austria. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Chloe. So already prior to the Hughes fire, the Palisades and Eaton fires were expected to be among the worst ever to hit LA. From a policy perspective, what do you think could have or should have been done to prevent so much damage?
Yes, so they are predicted to probably be the worst ever seen in the area. And these were real people. So the Palisades isn't a hugely wealthy region. These were regular families, and I have a colleague who had families and friends that sadly lost their houses in that region. And so it's going to be a massive effort to rebuild that area, which will take a strong policy. But we saw criticism of there not being enough water in the area. Also, in the case of California, up to 20% or more of firefighters are actually prisoners, so like people that have been convicted of crimes, which is not something that I had heard of in other places previously. So it's just going to take strong policy in terms of reducing emissions, and this would be something that globally needs to be tackled, but also in terms of making sure that resources are there to fight these fires. But in this case, it was just, you could just say very bad luck, because we had these strong Santa Ana winds, we had the impact of climate change, we had the impact of the atmospheric ocean oscillations such as ENSO, but also the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, making these winds stronger than the seasonal average in the area, and also just these fires being in the right place kind of at the right time for ignition. And we're seeing that now in other parts. However, authorities are saying they'll get it under control, and they are slightly further away from houses, and the winds are slightly lower in speed now. So that's very promising to make the devastation any worse, because it looks terrible. Like my colleague yesterday, who has friends and family areas, like it was like a tornado, a fire tornado had hit. There's nothing left of those people's houses. So that's very devastating for many, many people in the area.
So Chloe, in listening to you, it doesn't really sound like you as a researcher, again, specialized in fires and fire risk. It doesn't sound like you think that LA officials deserve a lot of the criticism that they've gotten.
I think that, there's always things in every single disaster when people look back that could have been done better. We know that that was the case in some of the European flooding in recent years as well. I think that, they could have done things better in terms of there was a lack of water in the area, which could have prevented it maybe spreading. But in terms of climate change, and also the winds and weather conditions that they had, they were fighting conditions that were made to spread fire and made to make a catastrophe. And that's something we're seeing increasing, these sort of fire conditions increasing with climate change and these fire danger days. So really, unless you reduce the emissions and you have that mitigation in terms of climate change, you are going to see an increase in these conditions, whether that's in California, but in other wildfire risk areas of the world. I mean, we've seen devastating fires in the Mediterranean region in Europe previously and in North Africa, just to name a few other places. So it really does take this mitigation as well as having the right resources in place to fight the fires.
Chloe, the fires in LA and, like you say, in other areas have kind of increasingly drawn more attention to natural building materials that would ideally make homes and other structures less vulnerable to the damage that we've seen in California and in other places. Can you talk about some of the alternative building techniques that you think would be better?
So I'm not really necessarily an expert in this area, but I think that the thing is that if you are in a wildfire risk, it's the same as if you build in a floodplain, right? There's only so much you can do to protect your houses. I think that it would be using the natural materials is good because it means that your house, if it was affected by fire, might not be so catastrophically destroyed. However, I think that we do need to rethink about where people live and also building mental resilience, and putting in place sort of insurance and adaptation measures for people so that they, in the case that the house is hit by something like a wildfire, but also a flood, they know that they can rebuild, or have the option to move out of that area that is actually at massive risk. We don't really see measures like that in place at the moment, and that is something that we'll need to see in the future, because there's people that are hit by wildfires or floods, not necessarily year on year, but increasingly over periods. And at the moment that they have now nowhere to live. But if their house was hit by a wildfire again, there's nothing really in place to help them, even though they have nothing at the moment.
Chloe Brimicombe, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.